Welcome to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, where we sit down with the people who give shape, texture, and voice to life on the North Fork of Long Island. Some are rooted here by generations, others arrived by chance or choice, but all carry with them a piece of the story. We talk about what's changing, what's worth holding on to, and the currents of history, both quiet and loud, that run through this place. I'm your host, Christopher Bianchi, and for episode 170, we sit down with Abigail Field, candidate for Southold Town Clerk. In our conversation, Abigail reflects on her early life and her connection to the North Fork. She talks about her background as an attorney and the experiences that have shaped her approach to public service, what inspired her to run for town clerk, and her vision for improving transparency and accessibility at Town Hall. We also discuss ways to modernize record-keeping and communication between local government and residents, and Abigail shares her hopes for the future of the North Fork. So I hope you enjoy episode 170 with Abigail Field. This episode was recorded September 17th, 2025. Thank you so much for coming on the Floyd Memorial Library podcast today. It's really great to have you on today.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to chatting.
Absolutely. And so in the beginning, I usually like to start off with if you can give a little background about yourself, where you were born and raised.
I was born in Manhattan. I went to elementary school in Manhattan on the Upper West Side, in a neighborhood that is now fancy because the apartments all went co-op. But back in the day, it was all rent stabilized in a very different sort of a neighborhood, just like New York City in the 70s and 80s was very different than it is now. Mm-hmm. I am a lifelong, or was a lifelong summer person on Shelter Island, though. Mm-hmm. I had my first birthday on Shelter Island. So my childhood for the first 12 years was New York City,
No problem.
New York City during the school year, and Shelter Island all summer long because my dad was an academic. We would come out on weekends in the spring, and we would do weekends in the fall until through Thanksgiving. But, it was New York City and then endless summertime on the island.
Yes.
And I turned 12, my mother remarried, and I moved to Groton, Connecticut. And so I would come out to Shelter Island to see my dad again for summers and weekends. But then instead of driving up from the city and driving off the LIE behind a dump truck full of potatoes, it was coming across on the Crosstown Ferry and driving past the Candyman, where, of course, we had to stop in at least once a weekend to get to the island.
Yes.
And those summers on the island meant that my childhood summer fun was like July 4th at the Greenport Carnival, not the Strawberry Festival. I didn't know anything about the Strawberry Festival until I moved to Cutchogue in 2011.
Okay.
When you're on Shelter Island, Greenport is something you connect to. We went to the movies. We went skating before the roller rink stopped being a roller rink, Went to Burton's Books before it was probably 2 or 3 owners before Scott now. And, that was long before Mitchell Park. In fact, there was this shopping cart that was shoved in the sand right by where the ferry docked. And you could tell the tide by like how much of the shopping cart you could see in the water. And one of the only other thing I'll say about those childhood years was that Shelter Island was really psychologically important because the city in the 70s and the 80s was a profoundly dangerous place. My mother had been held up in an elevator. My friend had their bike stolen because they got shoved off a bike. We all knew lots of victims. And, there would be the gunfire you'd hear in the neighborhood at night. There were the streets you couldn't walk on. We all practiced ways to walk down the street when you're on your own to stay safe. I mean, to this day, I don't like walking through scaffolding because we were always told about watch out for the shadows. You can't see who might be where.
Yes.
I mean, it really was a thing. But on Shelter Island, we didn't lock anything. And we would run around barefoot. And it would get dark at night and it would be quiet. And that profound sense of safety was really important to me as a person. It really helped me put the city's dangerousness in context. And yeah, I mean, Shelter Island has and always will have a very special place for me. My family bought a house, the house we had been renting in 1975. And actually to this day, my mother is living there now.
Mm-hmm. But did you go to high school in Groton?
I went to junior high and high school in Groton, Connecticut. Okay. And then I went to UConn as an in-state student.
Okay. But how would you describe even just Groton, Connecticut, just compared to the North Fork, just being close to each other with the Cross Sound Ferry?
Well, so Groton, Connecticut, and Mystic, which is part of Groton, have some things very much in common with the North Fork. Mm-hmm. I learned when I worked for the North Fork Promotion Council about a decade ago about Southold's history, and I was not surprised to learn that we were colonized by Connecticut in 1640 because of the churches on the village greens, the architecture in general, and also the accent. When I moved from New York City to Connecticut, I would talk about the piece of paper that the government gives you as a permit. Mm-hmm. And then my friend in Connecticut said to me how he was going to go get a permit. And I was like, that's so funny. That's such a silly way to say permit. And then here I was in the North Fork and somebody told me that they were going to go get a permit. And I was like, why do you sound like you're from Connecticut? This is New York. But then, like I said, I learned that Connecticut is who colonized us. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. It's not just the architecture we got. We also got the accent.
Yes. And you mentioned the Greenport Firemen's Carnival. Could you describe that experience and some memories from that?
Oh, sure. I mean, so July 4th had two key components. One of them was the fireworks at Crescent Beach. The other was the carnival. And at the carnival, my favorite thing was the bumper cars. But my next favorite thing was that game where you would squirt the water in the clown's mouth and the balloon would inflate on top.
Yes.
I was pretty good at that because I have very good reflexes. And so I could, I was often the person who would win that game. So that was also a real favorite. I mean, we enjoyed, the Midway in general and rides in general, but those are my two most favorite things. And I have a younger brother, so we would do the carnival, him and me and my dad, and it was always a ball.
Yes. And just going through high school, how was that experience? And did you have any favorite subject matter classes that you gravitated towards?
So I will say moving to Groton was something of a shock. I went from an incredibly diverse neighborhood where my public elementary school didn't have a single dominant ethnic group. Mm-hmm. And my friends were people like Paul Rogers and Lizzie Friedman, but also Sultana Rahman and Abdullah and Charlie Kim. Mm-hmm. And the diversity was just real. And a lot of people were on free breakfast as well as free brunch because this wasn't, a super wealthy neighborhood. I'm not I don't want to overstate its poverty. It was just a sort of an ordinary kind of a neighborhood.
Yes.
Connecticut in Groton was overwhelmingly white, overwhelmingly Christian, and very parochial. Like people in general hadn't even gone as far away as Hartford or Stamford, much less New York City or Boston. So it was a big culture shock to move there for school, and it did take a little while to adjust. It hadn't occurred to me that most of the world didn't have signs in Spanish and other languages too, right? It just, as a kid, you just know what you know from what you're growing up with. And you might think Shelter Island would have taught me different, but it didn't. Shelter Island was just its own magic place. And I didn't think of it as more typical of the world than my normal city life. I did adjust to Groton for sure. And in high school, I really enjoyed the sciences, actually. One of my favorite classes was in bacteriology. I also really enjoyed chemistry. And when I started college, I was actually a physics major, mostly because I thought quantum mechanics was super cool. When I realized that in my first year of honors physics that I was going to spend my time in windowless labs watching and counting pendulum swings and things, I was like, oh, this is not for me. No way. And I ended up loving this introductory geology course I took, and I ended up getting my bachelor's in geology because at least that was a science that took me outside so I could explore and enjoy the beautiful world, which was much more to my nature than physics.
Yes. And from there, what did you end up going for a master's after that?
So I've had a very unconventional path.
Okay.
If I start getting into the various chapters of the novel of my life, this could go on quite a long time. But I will try to give you a very high-level path. My first job out of college was as an environmental consultant doing my geology work. And I would go around the state trying to assess the risk that a given property was contaminated. And we would have to research the history of the property and the neighboring properties. We would take soil samples and soil vapor samples and install monitoring wells and all of that. But by the time I was almost 24, I was bored. I didn't need a 401k or business cards. And I realized I didn't want to go to graduate school for a doctorate in hydrogeology, which had been the on paper plan. So not knowing what I wanted to do, I threw everything in my car and drove cross country for 6 weeks, landed in California at a friend's house in San Francisco, started working for an environmental group, going door to door to get them members and help them influence policy to support environmental protection. Then I met a guy. And we took off and traveled, for almost 6 months, 5 of those in Mexico, sleeping on beaches and things, living on just a couple of dollars a day.
Yes.
Then we came back. He had an accident, and we came back and were living near his parents in the Sacramento Valley for a year. And then we lived in Marin for another year and a half. And I was doing random jobs ranging from being a schoolyard monitor in a middle school to being a tutor for the SATs and in math and chemistry and whatnot to being a bartender in a biker bar where the drinks that I did were pouring beer and shots. So I really don't count as a bartender. I never really had to mix a drink.
Okay.
Although that was quite a fun experience. And then around 1994, no, this would have been 96, give or take, I decided I had to get serious about a career. But I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I picked up the Berkeley catalog because I was living near there. And I read it cover to cover, skipping the sections that I knew I wasn't going to do, like chemistry and math and whatnot. And I picked the 3 most interesting classes I could find, and I took them non-matriculated, meaning I just was taking them not for credit, but with the permission of the professors and whatnot. Yes. And the most interesting one was an urban planning class. So then I took 3 urban planning classes that were graduate courses. And I then applied to both Berkeley and NYU for a master's in urban planning. I was accepted at both, but NYU was like, oh, we'll give you a title and a stipend and not charge you tuition. I was like, oh, great. And I get to come back east because, earlier in life, I had traveled to Europe. And while that had been amazing, I learned I was American. Living in California was amazing. And there's things I loved about it, but I learned I was a New Yorker. And so I was very happy to come back to NYU for school. But one semester into that degree, it became very clear to me that I didn't want the jobs that piece of paper was going to give me. The classes were interesting, but not the jobs. So I just decided, oh my goodness, I guess I got to go to law school. I've been sort of avoiding going to law school. My mother was an attorney.
Okay.
My father was a sociologist who eventually became an attorney. And so law school was just something that I knew all about, and I really didn't think I wanted to go there, but it's such a skeleton key degree. I was like, okay. So then I applied to NYU for law school simply on the theory that I could get both degrees in 4 years. I was like, if they don't let me in, I didn't even research NYU Law School before I applied to it. I was purely an expedient. I want 2 degrees in 4 years. I figured if they didn't let me in, I would do a proper search. I'd research all the law schools. I'd do a big application process after I'd finished my master's. But NYU let me in. And so I went to New Students Day, and I discovered that I was going to love it, that I'd found like the right place for me. And it turned out to be so true that in my 3rd year, the planning school said, if you want this degree, you have to skip a semester at the law school and come take classes with us. And I was like, you know what? I don't need your degree. So I'm not going back to school again. This is my one chance to take classes that I love and not worry about it. So I just finished out the law degree and abandoned the planning degree. And that was 2001 that I got my law degree.
And did you continued to work in New York City after that within the law area?
Yeah, I had been a finalist for a public interest scholarship, but I didn't get it, and law school is expensive. So for 3 years after law school, I worked for a fancy law firm and corporate firm in Rockefeller Plaza, which had its own glamorous dimension, but was not work I was remotely interested in trying to do for my life. That was about, paying off law school and such. And then I left that job for what was a dream job, which was being the legislative advocate for the New Jersey Public Interest Research Group, which meant that it was my job to lobby the New Jersey legislature in Trenton to try to pass laws and block laws and help write regulations or block regulations from the perspective of ordinary people. So I was always going up against the corporate lobbyists. And the corporate lobbyists had campaign contributions that they could give to influence legislators. But we didn't. Our funding came from people like I had once been, going door to door to inform the public and recruit members. We didn't have big budgets. So we would do research reports and prove we were right. We would organize press conferences and communicate effectively about the issues and the solutions and why the solutions mattered and people should get involved. We did a bunch of grassroots organizing. One of my research reports on deceptive prescription drug marketing made international press, which was kind of cool. But perhaps the most impactful campaign that I was a part of, and just to give a little context on time, John Corzine was governor of New Jersey at this point. So that was like 2006 into 2007. So sometime in 2006, he got into his head that he should sell control of the New Jersey Turnpike and the Garden State Parkway and the Atlantic City Expressway to a private company and securitize is the technical term, the toll revenue from those roads. And the reason he wanted to do it would mean he would get this huge multi-billion-dollar check that as governor of the state, he would have a lot of control over investing. But then New Jersey would have lost control over the maintenance and the toll increases and the rest for its 3 big roads for like 100 years, give or take.
Okay.
And from a public policy perspective, in my opinion, in the Perks position, this would have been a disaster. And so I helped organize the coalition, and I was the public face of the coalition, and we stopped him. And New Jersey still owns its 3 big roads.
Oh, wow.
And so that was pretty cool.
Yeah. And before we get to out here, I wanted to ask just your thoughts on New York City through that time and just growing up there early up until 12 and then coming back there and living there for a while. What did you think of some of the changes through New York City? So
I came back to New York City in 1998, which was during, I don't know if it was during or right before.
Before Giuliani?
Well, Giuliani was right around then.
Oh, okay.
And so I lived through Mayor Giuliani's investment of political capital in changing how policing was done in New York City. And in fact, yes, no, he was definitely mayor, and that had started happening because while I was in the planning degree, there was a scandal where the police brutalized this Haitian immigrant named Abner Louima. And I had an assignment for a planning course that I had to analyze a New York City policy. And so I was like, I want to analyze how New York City does policing. And so I got very deep into New York City and policing. And that turned into, in law school, I went to a lecture by the prosecutor who prosecuted the Louima cops. And based on the informed questions I was able to ask because of what I knew, the professor who hosted that talk hired me as his graduate assistant because he was into policing and whatnot. And so I've done research and been published in law review articles on racial profiling because that was also part of the policing scene. I will give then Mayor Giuliani real credit for investing political capital in changing how policing was done. Policing used to be very reactive, and there was this attitude, you cannot really do anything about it. We'll come in and try to solve it later. And so there was a scandal in the 70s that led to the Knapp Commission report. And it was all about how the cops would so-called coop. They'd go hang out on the job and not really do anything. Giuliani brought in a guy from Boston named Bill Bratton. And he was the architect of what became known as CompStat, which was this idea that we are going to actually track crime and try to rationally deploy resources to reduce crime. And one of the key pieces of that was allowing people to volunteer for being searched and having their names run by prosecuting low-level crimes. They invented an ideology called broken windows theory to sort of rationalize this, but the theory doesn't really hold up. But what did hold up was when Bratton started arresting turnstile jumpers. Again, these are people volunteering to interact with the police by obviously breaking a law when you jump a turnstile. He would have the cops run their names and search them. And they took a lot of guns off the street. And they found a lot of open warrants by going after these people volunteering as they committed these low-level crimes. But eventually that had very diminishing returns, right? Because you've caught those warrants and you've taken those guns off the street. And things started to get much less sort of universally beneficial as the cops kept looking for ways to stop people, to search them and run their names, and they weren't now just getting people obviously volunteering by plainly breaking the law in front of them, but they would just look at somebody and decide they had what the phrase in constitutional law is reasonable suspicion, that they had reasonable suspicion to stop and frisk them. And that's when the racial profiling really got bad because cops started using race as their only basis for reasonable suspicion. And you could see this in the paperwork. I mean, if you want to go down a rabbit hole on New York City policing, I can go there. But I don't know that you want it right now. The bottom line is I will give Giuliani real credit. The city changed. The city got much safer. He didn't appreciate the attention Bill Bratton was getting, so he fired him. And he put in somebody from the fire department, a guy named William Safer, as the head of the cops. And that was a real change in how people were made the head of agencies, because it's not like he came up through the ranks of the cops or came over from some other police department. It got worse and worse in terms of the profiling and the rest after that.
Yeah, no, I've definitely seen that change. But over your time there in New York City, would you continue to come out here in the summer, or?
So when I first moved back to the city, we actually had tenants in our house, and so I didn't have that opportunity. And I learned that actually I don't love living in New York City 24/7, 365. That actually it was important to have access to where the air is clean and things are quiet and green and have the water, way that is beyond New York Harbor and the two rivers, you know. When the tenants moved out, we reverted to using it for weekends and whatnot. And then I met my husband while I was living in New Jersey doing that legislative advocate role. And we had a baby, and so we moved to Shelter Island to the house to be near family, because my mother was still in Groton, which was quite close to the island by ferries. And my husband had family on the island because he was I married a Shelter Islander. And that was the end of my New York City and New Jersey lifetime.
And did you say was it coming out here in 2012?
No, so I moved to Shelter Island full-time in 2007.
In 2007, okay.
Because that's when my daughter was born. We were out there like 2 months after she was born. And then by the time she was 2, my husband and I were in full agreement that we wanted to send our kids to school on the North Fork, not on the island. He hadn't had a great educational experience, and while I've heard the school is much better than it was back then, I wanted my kids to have more than 12 kids in a grade and whatnot. So I started bringing my daughter to nursery school in Cutchogue on the theory that at least that way she'd make some friends before she started kindergarten, and she could go to kindergarten knowing some of the other local kids. And, then we had my son, and then we moved to Cutchogue for real when my daughter was 4 and my son was 1. And she started Cutchogue East for kindergarten. And then she graduated this past year. Actually, she just went to college, and my son is a sophomore now in Mattituck.
Okay. And being out here, did you start to get involved in the community, working with Mattituck Park District?
So my work with the Park District actually started in April 2024.
Okay.
So when I first moved here, I was practicing law for myself, part-time from my house. We made the decision that I would be fundamentally a stay-at-home mom, but my husband's career was not one that meant a single income could support us. So I also always made money. I would do that partly by my law practice from the house, and partly through part-time jobs that I would have. Like I did freelance journalism while I was still living on the island. I was published on AOL's Daily Finance a lot. I actually got picked up by the AP one time. That was super cool. I got a shout out by John Cassidy of the New Yorker. That was super cool. And I was covering things during the great financial crisis and the foreclosure fraud crisis that followed. And the Attorney General of Arizona cited one of my pieces that I published in Fortune.com in her lawsuit against some of the big banks. So that also felt really pretty cool. When I was down the North Fork, I wasn't doing as much journalism, but I did start working for the North Fork Promotion Council as their acting executive director. And so that was one of my part-time jobs supplementing my law income for a while. And
you kept probably coming out through the 90s and 2000s to the North Fork even?
No, so when I took off to California in 94, then I came back in 90. So I would be coming out here. My dad died in 1992 of cancer. He was young. He was 64. It is what it is, but it really, it was awful because my father and I were quite close. Yes. So in the wake of that, the Shelter Island house, was just impossible to see without having to wallow in the grief of that. So after 1992, I didn't go back there until I'd come back to the city for grad school and the tenants moved out, which was around 2000. So I missed most of the 90s out here.
What did you think of the North Fork when you initially came back out? Did you think it had changed from even as a child?
Well, so Greenport had been transformed. By the time I came back, Mitchell Park was a thing. The carousel was there. the arcade was open when I was a kid and I'd go shopping there. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that closed. But, there was a lot of other stuff going on. So Greenport had been transformed and the farms had been transformed. I mean, when I was a kid driving up from the city, it was the dump truck of potatoes and my wondering how come none of those potatoes is landing on our windshield, because they never did. I never saw one go flying, but I always wondered, to the vineyard reality that it is now. So yes, there was that change. But because of the Shelter Island-centric reality I always had, I didn't have as deep a sense of all of Southold Town as I did of Greenport. And, the drive from the Orient Ferry to Greenport really didn't change, not in any visual way. Mm-hmm. So my biggest sense of change was just those two things. Greenport was transformed and all the farms, or not all the farms, but many of the farms had become vineyards.
Yes. And coming up to today, we're coming up to the election for November. What inspired you to run for town clerk this year, and how did that come about?
So the reason I went to law school originally was to do policy. I have always been politically active for my whole life in a variety of different ways. I mean, in high school, I organized model Congress in my high school. There hadn't been one, right? I've just always been fundamentally focused on trying to make government better. And in this particular moment of time, I'm not interested, actually, though, in policy. I have been alienated from many of the policy discussions because of how vicious it's gotten. It feels over all the years like I am in a moment where people hesitate to find our common ground, hesitate to connect around an issue from all the perspectives. And there's just a lot of Team Jersey yelling that's happening. So one of the things that I really like about the clerk's job is that it's the operations job. You don't set policy, you implement policy, and you make things work for everybody in town. How well the clerk's office is run matters for people. It impacts their experience of government. And I would love to improve people's experience of local government. And there are some very specific ideas I'm happy to get into in a second about ways I think I can make people's experience of Southold government better, and also make it easier for people to participate in Southold government in a way that is very true to my nature. I'm very interested in small d democracy. I think policy is better when you have the broadest range of stakeholders at the table possible. And in our currently overwhelmingly busy world where it's really a struggle for most people to make ends meet, so having the time to participate in policy is hard, I'm really interested in being a part of making it easy for people to participate.
Yeah.
So those are things about the clerk's role that really appeal to me. But the other answer to your question, why now, is a sort of different in kind. I feel I owe Southold Town an unpayable debt. And I hope by making people's experience of local government better and serving the town, that I can meaningfully repay that debt. The reason I think I owe this town a debt is because on April 10th of 2023, my husband suffered this really awful workplace accident. And in that moment of crisis, when Big Strong Daddy went down, and, to be clear, we consider, before I go into that detail, to be clear, we consider ourselves very lucky, notwithstanding the accident, right? I mean, he's not dead. He's not paralyzed. His brain is intact. But it was that scale accident. He broke lots of vertebrae. He broke all his ribs. He broke his leg. He broke his wrist. He separated his shoulder. I mean, this was a really big deal accident.
Yes.
So In my family's moment of crisis, Southold Town had our back. His boss, a guy named John Fab, I'll give a plug for Twin Forks Landscape Contracting, he was like a saint to us. He really went above and beyond. But besides John, the Lions Club came out for us, Kate's Angels came out for us, the Southold Town Democrats came out for us, and a lot of individuals helped us in all kinds of ways. And what that meant was I could focus on my husband and my children. The fact that I had a gift card to a restaurant and so I didn't have to go grocery shop and cook was huge. Yes. We were driving back and forth to Stony Brook, you know? I mean, it was the idea that all the extra tanks of gas could get covered. I mean, it was just, it really was important. And I'm happy to report that 2 years later, my daughter is thriving at college, my son is thriving in Mattituck, and my husband is finding his new way forward in life. I mean, he won't work again, but, he's mobile and he's intact and he can have a reasonably good quality of life. But it was quite the journey the last couple of years getting from that accident to this moment. Yes. And part of our successful getting to this moment is Southold Town's community spirit and generosity. And frankly, this is just what Southold is as a community, because it's not like they did this for me and nobody else. Constantly, you read about the different people who are having charitable events organized for them because this town takes care of each other. And so that's the other reason why clerk, why now. I want to give back.
No, definitely. Like you said, I've seen that across the community where people really come together when people really need it. But in terms of the town clerk's office, it is the first point of contact, usually with the local government. How do you envision improving that experience for residents and businesses?
So the first thing is I'm going to open it for more hours.
Okay.
8 to 4 is not very convenient, or even 8 to 4:30. I mean, the only reason we were able to get our permits is because I was that stay-at-home, work-from-home person. My husband would leave the house at 6:30 in the morning to go to work. He often didn't get back till 6:30 at night, like 8 to 4. There are a variety of ways I could offer the extra hours. I mean, one is I could just do them myself. As a salaried elected position, there's no overtime issue. But I'm also happy to offer the staff flex time. If somebody wants to come in early and then leave early, if somebody wants to come in later and stay later, I'm happy to figure out the way that works for people. But the very first thing is just to make the office more accessible, make it easier for people to get their permits. Another thing that I'd like to do is generally improve the transparency of Southold Town government. And that gets to the idea of making it easier for people to participate. The clerk's office does the town board agenda. They do the minutes. The town clerk's office is at every town board meeting and work session. So I've just started going to all of them. I mean, over the years, I've gone to them. I've testified. I've weighed in. That's just part of participating in town. But I wrote up a summary of the work session. Bullets, not any narrative, but just here's what they talked about. Here's what came out of it. And then similarly for the town board meeting, they talked about these things. They adopted resolutions that do these type of stuff. Not all the detail. If they want all the detail for each resolution, the agenda is there. But most people aren't going to be able to make a town board work session at 9 in the morning on a Tuesday. And many people can't make a town board meeting, whether it's at 4:30 or at 7:30 on a Tuesday. We have busy lives. Streaming these is similarly challenging, especially the work sessions, because when they go into executive session, the stream stops. And if you try to log in when they're doing that, you just can't get in. Similarly, watching it, the whole thing after it's been done, is a real commitment of time. I mean, work sessions can be 3, 5, 6 hours long. Town board meetings can be an hour or 3. So by doing these little summaries, I would be hoping to let people be informed and then make a decision. Oh, wow, that's actually a topic that really matters to me. I'm going to watch that stream and see what went down. Or, okay, that's good to know that that's what's going on, but I don't have to pay closer attention to it. And that's just one little example of something that is very easy for me to do as an attorney and as a journalist and whatnot. Writing up these quick things it's just very easy for me to do that. And It would be a simple thing. A third thing I would do to try to make people's experience of government better is to try to improve efficiency. And I'll give you both a high level and then an example from the Park District to let you know what I mean by that. The idea that the way we do things is the way we've always done them, which seems to be kind of the mantra in town hall in general, and in particular in the clerk's office, is not to me a reason to keep doing it. The world has changed a lot in the last 20 to 30 years, and so there might well be better ways to do things. Now, I'm not a change for change's sake person. If, in fact, the way we've always done it is the best way to do it, let's keep it. Yes. But as the clerk, I would review all the policies and try to look for ways to make things more efficient. Like just also on the permits, besides expanding hours, it's not clear to me why more permits aren't done online. Maybe there's a very good reason for that, or maybe there's something we could do about that process to make the online purchase a more valuable option that more people could do. The example I was going to give from the Park District, which just sort of shows the attitude that I bring, I got hired by them in April of 24 in a very narrow role. I was called the recording secretary, and I was supposed to spend only 10 hours a month, and my job was to do agendas, attend meetings, and do minutes, which, again, is all very Southold Town Clerk type role stuff. And very early on, I'm in a meeting where one commissioner goes, let's do that with our co-sponsoring policy. And somebody else in the meeting says, we don't have a co-sponsoring policy. And so the meeting went sideways, and they couldn't accomplish the thing they were trying to accomplish. And watching that happen, I was disappointed because commissioners, while elected, are truly volunteers. They not only don't they get paid, but like they're coming together twice a month to have these meetings. And it really matters that they can use their time effectively when they're in a meeting. So I said, hey, why don't you give me some more hours, and I'll make you a database, and I'll tell you real time whether or not you have a policy that says that. And if you do, I'll tell you what the policy says. And they were like, oh, great idea. So I did. It was a heavy lift at first because there were like 5 years of resolutions they wanted me to put into the database, which I say database, it's just an Excel spreadsheet, right? I labeled what kinds of things everything was. So if we want to get the employment resolutions or the resolutions to buy equipment or whatever, we can gather the resolutions any which way. And there's a link that goes from the spreadsheet to the minutes of the meeting at which the resolution was adopted. So you can get the full text and you can get the context. But it's not a complex document. And now that it's created, it's very easy to maintain because we only adopt a handful of resolutions a meeting. So that new piece of institutional memory that I created for them has meant that meetings run much more smoothly and we waste a lot less time. Does Southold Town need a resolution index? I don't know. But I have this ability to say that process isn't running very well. There's a better way. And my approach is to then ask the people impacted by that process, what do you think of this idea? How's this as a solution? And that I'm happy to incorporate their feedback and, go forward with the process improvements. So, for example, in that spreadsheet, it wasn't actually my idea to link to the minutes. That was the treasurer's suggestion. I thought it was a great suggestion, and I incorporated it. I'm very collaborative by nature, and I'm focused on the work itself. Like, let's make this thing succeed. Not, I've got to do this,
Yes.
So that's an example of the approach I would take to making things more efficient, and the fact that I think there are probably a lot of opportunities given the fact that the office hasn't really updated its processes in a long time.
Yes. And you also talked about wanting to proactively keep the public
informed. Right. So one way is through those sorts of summaries. But there are many other kinds of opportunities, right? So at the Park District, I noticed that after I'd been there for about 8 months, they hadn't sent out a newsletter yet. And I was like, you've got to start talking to your residents. And they mentioned how they had this quarterly newsletter. I'm like, well, I've been here 2 quarters. We haven't done it. So I helped them design a new template for the newsletter. And we got on a monthly rhythm. And we are now 8 issues out. And the newsletter is structured to give residents a fairly comprehensive view of what the Park District's up to. It includes information on what happened during the month it's talking about retroactively. It has information about what's coming up. It has an opportunity for the clerk to talk to residents about what he thinks needs to be said. It has a section for the facilities manager to talk to residents about the stuff they think needs to be addressed. It has a space for the commissioners called Commissioner's Corner to really talk about it. And the newsletter has been very well received. I would be very happy to do a newsletter out of Town Hall, but before I committed to doing that or starting to do that, there are actually other improvements I'd want to make first. So I'm on a lot of the email lists for the town. I personally don't find the way the emails are formatted and set up and sent out to be that helpful. I'm not sure how much of the issue is software related and how much of it is just somebody hasn't really thought through how to make this better yet. Yes. But I would like to look into improving the emails we already do. Similarly, the Facebook page, as I see it, is not that helpful. I think there is ways we could improve the existing Facebook page to make it more useful to people. I also think that the websites related to the town board, both its meetings and its work sessions, and the page of the clerk's page itself, how it gets used, could all be improved. And so I think there are changes that could be made to the website that the clerk's office rightly has real influence over. Because, the clerk's office isn't in charge of the whole website. But the pieces that are near and dear to the clerk's function, I think, also need real improvement. So I would want to come in and try to improve the existing communication tools before layering on a new one in the form of, say, a newsletter. But, when I was with the Promotion Council, I did a newsletter. I've done, and like I said, the journalism and other things in the Park District newsletter. It would be very natural and easy for me to develop such a thing. But I do want to make sure that before starting something new, we improve and maximize what's already in place.
Yes. And what about just with the town clerk's role, record keeping for the whole town and making sure that's organized, or even updating that to make it easier for people to find records?
So I agree that the clerk's role in keeping the records is a very important role, as is providing as easy access as possible to those records. Some of that would require redesigning the website, and I don't know at the moment how much control or influence the clerk's office could have in that redesign. I do think there is some talk about an overall redesign, and if I were in office, I would use my experience in public communications and with maintaining websites, like I did for the Promotion Council and myself back in the day that I had a blog, to help improve that user interface. But I don't want to make a concrete promise about how I could improve the clerk's website without knowing actually how much influence I might have on the design. That said, there are surely things that can be done. There are various text edits, and there are ways, like I'll give you an example of something I'm sure could have been done, but was not done this year. Back a couple of months ago at this point, the town invested real resources in a transparency exercise called the State of the Town. Every department in town wrote a report and submitted it. And all of those reports got combined into a veritable book. It was almost 100 pages long, something like that. And Supervisor Krupski gave a speech at Peconic Landing, and he took questions until the questions were done. You know, he was up there for any question. And so this was a really big transparency effort, or a book on here's everything we did in the last year, and hey, I'm talking to you about the last year and taking your questions so you're done. Mm-hmm. But the town didn't stream it. The town didn't record it. Beth Young of the East End Beacon was there, and she recorded it, and I got her link from her, so I put it up on my campaign Facebook page, but there was no link posted on the clerk's page, so nobody had access to that speech in the Q&A unless they were one of the 50 people in the room, or they got it from the Beacon. Mm-hmm. And to me, that was a real missed opportunity. Similarly, I couldn't find the report on the website. I didn't see any real talk about it on the website. I didn't see a link to it on the website. So originally, I scanned the whole thing and I uploaded it on my campaign Facebook page. But then it dawned on me that maybe if I used the search bar, I could find it. So in the search bar, I put in state of the town, and sure enough, the most recent report became available. But you wouldn't know to put that magic phrase in there, state of the town, unless you knew it was a thing. And again, there was no real promotion of it on the page anywhere. So, you know, if I had been clerk this past summer, that speech would have been streamed, even if I had to do it on my own cell phone, right?
Yes.
I mean, the speech would have been streamed. It would have been recorded. It would have been posted. The report would have been posted. I would have presented it in some eye-catchy way to make clear that it's here, everybody. You should be interested, because I am confident that people in Southold would be interested in the information. Like there's a bunch on code enforcement. People talk about code enforcement all the time. The town attorneys did a report on their code enforcement. People are very interested in the building department. The building department reported on all various permits that it issued, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, each department reported.
Yes.
It was a really good transparency exercise. But, you know, there's that old line, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody hears it, did it make a sound? There's a lot invested in a transparency exercise, but nobody knows it happened, was it very transparent? Mm-hmm. Right? So that's another example of a way I would try to do something pro-transparency. But, you know, this isn't transparency just for the sake of transparency. It's about making it easy for people in town to know what their government's doing and to know about ways they can participate in what's happening. Yes. And I'm very interested in making that easy for people to know what's going on and also find ways to participate.
And I think we have the technology has evolved where I think it should be easier to have everything at people's fingertips moving forward, just with other digital tools and online access for the community.
I would imagine that if we assessed our technological resources effectively and thought through how is it we could use these to make it as easy as possible for people to know what's going on and participate in their government, that we could come up with a lot of ways to improve things. But other than these very specific things that I already know about, I'm a little shy about making promises about how I could remake the website or something, because government has certain silos and authorities, and I would need to be in office and understand sort of the bureaucratic rules and ways before I could be really sure what was within my power to make happen. But also, to be clear, if it wasn't officially within my power, but I thought it was important, I'm very happy to talk with my colleagues and try to persuade them to do the right thing, right? I mean, I'm not interested in just hiding in my silo and saying, well, that's not my thing to deal with. Yes. I don't mean that. I just don't want to overpromise if I have to persuade somebody to do the right thing, because maybe I succeed at persuading them and maybe I don't. You know?
Yes. And as you mentioned, you've continued to be active in civic life and supporting community institutions. How would you bring that community-oriented approach into your work as town clerk?
So I think that's just a piece of the general point I'm making.
Mm-hmm.
My focus is on Southold as a community. How can this town, how can the residents of this town know what the government of this town is doing? Like the way they know now very often is the rumor mill. A lot of what people think they know about, say, the zoning update, right? They know because they heard it from somebody.
Yes.
And like any game of telephone, the rumor mill is not a reliable source of information. You get a couple of steps down from the original source, and things might have gotten a little bit disconnected from the underlying reality. Mm-hmm. And so for me, what transparency is all about is fundamentally pushing back on the rumor mill. You want to know about the zoning update? Let's make it easy for you to get really good information about what the town board is doing about this zoning update. And, the town actually tries. They have a zoning update webpage that is pretty comprehensive. So I don't want to come across like, well, I'll just add some more web language and that'll solve it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
yes.
But I just nonetheless think there are ways to just consistently make it easier for people to get their own direct information from the town about what's going on in the town so that they don't have to rely on the rumor mill.
Definitely. And then just in general, I wanted to ask, just with your time out here, what do you enjoy most about living and working on the North Fork?
So one of the things I love is the connection to our land and waters that is out here. You see it as you drive around and you look at everybody's landscaping. I don't mean the lawns. I mean the trees and the shrubs and the flowers. People take a lot of pride in their property out here. And I love that. I love how connected people are to their gardens. I like to garden. We always had a vegetable garden when I was growing up. I married a guy who, he's a tree guy. He was in landscape business. We have wonderful gardens on our property because of his design and work. And over the years, I've taken more of a role in maintaining all of our plants. And, I love that. Similarly, I like walking my dogs on Duck Pond Beach. Mm-hmm. And I love that beach in particular because it is geologically quite dynamic, actually, because of how high the tide comes up all the time, mm-hmm. and the bluffs and the watching the erosion real time. And I love out here how easy it is to be connected to our water and our land in that kind of way as well. But the most important, I have to say, is the people. I mean, this is really a community. Mm-hmm. A lot of places, are sort of busted. And we have, Lions and Rotary and libraries and civics and effective environmental organizations. Enough of them, I just got to refer to them as that category because there's several of them. Yes. We have, good schools. We have volunteer fire departments. I mean, there's really a commitment to each other out here that is quite special. And I love that about here. And, although my roots on the island Shelter Island are really deep, mm-hmm. I'm one of the people who likes to be on the mainland more. So, my husband would talk about some people get off the rock, which is the insider word for Shelter Island. Yes. And some don't, and he's one mm-hmm. of the ones who leaves the rock, which is why he's with me in Cutchogue instead of still on the island. Mm-hmm. This place just really connects to both of us.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And separate from what your role would be as town clerk, just looking ahead, obviously things have changed throughout the North Fork and there's issues and opportunities moving forward. But what are your hopes for the future of the North Fork and its community further down the line?
I hope that the town gets real about housing. We are in crisis. This town will get hollowed out and lose this deep community if ordinary people can't afford to live here. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I was a kid, we were taught you should spend a quarter to a third of your income on housing. Most people have to spend a half of their income or maybe more on housing. That's untenable.
Yes.
And, while home prices have gone up and down over the years and, generally speaking, more up than down, the transformation that the COVID market did to housing prices out here has rendered young people moving here with their children largely untenable. I mean, our school population is really small. My daughter graduated with over 90 kids in her class, but my understanding is like the elementary school classes are 50 kids, give or take.
Yes.
And I think Southold is smaller. The fact that we're losing our families and losing our young people is really problematic for the health of the community. And so what do I wish for Southold Town? I wish for Southold Town that it solves housing and makes it possible for people of ordinary means to live here. Because if we don't, then we will have our own trade parade.
Yes.
And we will have collapsing school districts. And we will have an inability to get people to volunteer for the fire departments. And we will have just lots of knock-on effects that are really problematic. Mm-hmm. Beyond solving housing, my next wish for the town would be an increased focus on our climate resiliency. I very much appreciate the work that the current town board and highway superintendent have done to take on the flooding issues that have been happening, mm-hmm. and with the increased drainage, with the mapping of safe exit routes and helping first responders know how they could get in and around during storms. I appreciate very much that the current town board and highway superintendent are working with the county and the state to deal with County Road 48 and State Road 25. But there's so much more that needs to be done to help this place adapt to the climate risks that continue to increase. That's a big issue, and the solutions aren't cheap.
Yes. No, and then just lastly, I'd like to ask just if there are any last-minute things you'd like to say to our listeners that we might not have touched on, or just any final thoughts as we go into November 5th.
Well, I would say again that I am very grateful to the residents of Southold Town for having my back in my family's moment of crisis, and how I would like to, give my talents and experience in service to this town. I do not have the normal resume for somebody who runs for an office like this. I mean, I also was a legislative counsel for the Voting Rights Lab for 4 years. I am an expert at reading legislation. I analyze statutes really well. I don't know municipal law in particular very well, to be clear, although as clerk, I'm confident I would start learning quite a bit about it, being right in the thick of it all. But, my skills in communicating with the public as a journalist and as a grassroots legislative advocate and whatnot give me unusual skills for a role like the clerk, where so much of it is about organizing information and communicating effectively with the public, whether the information is in the form of records that you need to keep or records that you're making to make it easier for the public to know about what the town board is up to and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And I think I would deliver an unusual amount of value. I think people should be aware that the clerk's job is one of the higher paid jobs in town hall, and that if people are looking to maximize the value of their tax dollars, I would encourage them to consider what I could give them. But I would happily do it, because of both my love of making government better and making government work well, but also because of the support we received. I really hope that this town would give me the opportunity. And I thank them and you for this time.
Well, definitely. Well, no, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast today and share your story and your continued involvement in the community and talking about what you would do as town clerk here. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks. Have a great day.
Well, I hope you enjoyed episode 170 with Abigail Field. I want to thank you for listening to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, and we'll see you next time.